They came at dawn. Through the break in the cornstalks, I saw them, figures moving with silent precision, black rifles held low but ready. The sun hadn't cleared the ridge yet, but the tree line was already alive with motion. Tom crouched beside me, one hand on the tractor's rusted frame, the other clenched into a fist. His breathing was steady, but I could hear it. We both knew what was coming. We weren't soldiers anymore. But we hadn't forgotten how to die if it came to it. "You count 12, he whispered. 14, I said. 2 more near the shed. He nodded once, just a twitch of the head. The light caught his face, carved by time and sun and long hours of worry. He was a farmer, but this morning, he looked like something older. Something forged. I stayed in shadow, my back to the rusted steel. My hands didn't shake. That was the part one still hated. How easily it came back. How quiet the mind got when danger arrived. "They're not law," I said. "No. They're not." And we waited. 24 hours earlier, I was nobody. Just a man with a rucksack, a stale resume, and a list of places I wasn't welcome anymore. The bus dropped me outside Boone County, Nebraska, under the faded sign for a feed store that had closed down last winter. I walked north for a mile past fields beaten down by drought and silence. Then I saw the Ridley farm. The barn sagged on one side. The fields looked tired. So did the man in the flannel shirt waving from the porch. He introduced himself as Tom. "I can pay you for 3 days," he said. "Longer if I can make the harvest. You any good with diesel engines?" "I am." "You military?" "Used to be." He nodded. No more questions. The work started that afternoon. Wiring a broken irrigation relay. Replacing fuel lines. Hauling wet hay. He didn't talk much, and neither did I. But he watched me closely. The way some veterans do, looking for tells. Limp. Posture. Ghosts. That night, over cornbread and leftover stew, he spoke again. "You know, I lost someone over there. Iraq, 07. Convoy hit a mine outside Mosul. Would have died if someone hadn't dragged him out the fire. Don't remember his name. Never even saw his face." I looked at him. "Who?" "Me," he said quietly. "They told me later. Someone pulled me out. That's all I know." I nodded. Didn't speak. He looked past me then, toward the window. "I just think, sometimes you don't get to repay what's owed. You just try to keep something alive." He didn't know. Not yet. But I remembered the convoy. The burning Humvee. The smell of scorched metal and blood. I didn't remember faces back then, but his voice struck a chord I hadn't heard in years. I slept in the barn that night. The wind rattled the rafters. Outside, coyotes called to the stars. I didn't come to Boone County for work. Not really. I came because I couldn't carry it anymore. The silence. The dishonor. The truth they buried. And now, 24 hours later, I was behind a rusted tractor with the same man I once saved, facing the same kind of enemy. But this time, it wasn't about a foreign flag. It was about telling the truth before someone buried it for good. The morning after I arrived, Lucy came home from town with a bruised look in her eyes. She didn't say anything at first. Just set a bag of canned goods on the kitchen counter and walked out to the porch. Tom followed her. Their voices rose, sharp but distant, like a quarrel on the other side of a thin wall. "She dropped out," he said later, his voice tight. "College was too much. Debt. Noise. She came home." I nodded. "She doesn't say much to strangers. I'm not here for conversation." Tom looked at me a long time before turning back to his coffee. We drove to town that afternoon for feed and parts. Boone County had the look of a place everyone left but forgot to bury. Empty shops with papered windows. A diner with one working neon letter. And the market, half aisles, low shelves, and silence that hung in the air like dust. At the register, the young cashier scanned my few items. Then she paused at my veteran ID. She turned it over once. Squinted. "You really a vet?" Her voice wasn't mean. Just empty. That kind of young arrogance that hadn't seen grief yet. The room went quiet. A woman in line stopped writing her check. A man near the freezer looked up from his phone. Then, from behind us, an older voice. "I know this guy," he said. We turned. An old man in a cowboy hat, standing by the milk fridge. He took off his glasses. He pulled my grandson out of a building in Kandahar. "You want to question something, question the goddamn war, not the men who fought it." He said it calm. Even. But the silence that followed carried weight. The cashier scanned the rest without a word. We left in silence. But the words stayed. Tom didn't speak until we got back on the road. "You ever been to Kandahar?" "Too many times." He didn't press. Just nodded and turned the truck down the long gravel road. That evening, I saw them. Black SUVs, parked at the edge of the far cornfield. Too clean. Too still. The kind of government-issue muscle I recognized from years past. 3 men stood outside one of the vehicles, hands clasped in front, sunglasses on though the sun had dipped below the horizon. I went inside. Gathered my things. Hid nothing. "Friends of yours?" Tom asked, watching from the porch. "No. They don't look like locals." "They're not." He studied them a moment longer. "Trouble?" "Yes." I walked back out and stood at the edge of the dirt driveway. They didn't move. Just watched. Then, slowly, they got back in their vehicles and drove off without a sound. The message was clear. They knew where I was. Years ago, in a place we never should have been, I exposed something. Orion Global, a contractor we used to rely on, ran black ops outside any flag, any law. I'd seen what they did. Villages burned. Bodies moved like cargo. I wrote it up. Gave testimony. Thought someone would listen. They didn't. I lost my rank. My pension. My record stained with fabricated charges. Dishonorably discharged. No appeal. No apology. The name Jack Carson became a ghost in every veteran system. Employers wouldn't touch it. Friends disappeared. The VA shrugged. So I disappeared too. Until now. Later, in the attic, Lucy found an old shoebox. Inside, newspaper clippings. Photos. A few military patches. And one image. Tom Ridley, 20 years younger, standing beside a man in desert camo, arm around his shoulder. My face. Iraq, 2007. She didn't say anything. Just brought it down the stairs. Laid it gently on the table where her father was fixing an old radio. He looked at the photo for a long time. "That's you," he said. I nodded. "You pulled me from the Humvee?" "I didn't know until now." He sat back in his chair. No words. Just the weight of memory settling into the corners of the room. Outside, the black SUVs didn't return that night. But the storm had already started. Orion wasn't finished. And this time, they weren't coming for secrets. They were coming to erase what was left. By morning, Sheriff Joel Carter was at the edge of the property. He didn't come with lights. No sirens. Just a dented county cruiser and a quiet step on the porch. He took off his hat as he approached me where I was coiling the irrigation line. "Jack Carson?" he asked. I nodded. "Desert Storm. Fallujah. 91, he said, holding my eyes. I recognized that look. "You're not here to cause trouble. But trouble seems to have found you anyway." I didn't reply. He waited a moment, then sighed. "Mind if I look around?" Tom appeared behind me. "You got a warrant, Joel?" "No," the sheriff admitted. "Just a gut and a hunch." Tom didn't answer, just moved aside. Sheriff Carter walked the property with slow, careful steps. He looked at the trampled corn rows, the strange tire marks by the gravel. Then he came back. "If this is what I think it is," he said to me, "you won't win this alone. Orion has money. Silence. Friends in suits. They also have a trail," I said. "One they thought they buried." Carter looked at me a long time. "You planning to stay and fight?" "I didn't come to run." That earned the smallest nod. "If it comes to it," he said, "you won't stand alone. Not here." Later that day, Lucy approached me with the photo again. "You saved my father," she said. "Back then. I didn't know who he was." "Doesn't matter. You still did." She looked down at the patch on my duffel bag. "The one I hadn't touched in years. They ruined your name." I said nothing. Then she added, "They don't get to ruin it forever." It struck something in me I hadn't felt in years. Not pride. Not anger. Hope. A small, sharp hope. By evening, they returned. 3 SUVs. This time they didn't keep their distance. Tom and I were fixing the broken gate when the first man stepped out. Military cut. Civilian clothes. The kind of blank face that knew how to blend in and disappear afterward. He didn't come with guns drawn. Just a calm voice. "Jack Carson?" Tom straightened beside me. The man continued. "You need to come with us." "On what grounds?" He smiled faintly. "You know how this works. We don't need grounds. Just clearance." "You don't have any here," Tom said flatly. The man ignored him. "Jack, we can do this quietly. You come with us, this ends clean." "And if I don't?" The man's voice dropped a pitch. "Then we do it messy. And nobody wants that." I looked past him. 2 more men near the back vehicle. Another with a drone scanner. I'd seen this before, in Kandahar, Fallujah, places that were meant to vanish. But this wasn't a foreign country. This was Nebraska. "I want to speak to Colonel Marcus Hill," I said. That name stopped them. The lead operative tilted his head. "You're reaching, Carson. He's not your friend anymore." "Maybe not. But he's the one who signed the report that ended my life. He owes me the chance to end it properly." The man didn't reply. But I saw something shift. A decision he didn't want to make. "Don't go far," he said, stepping back. Tom and I didn't move. They left at dusk, without a word. But they would return. And not alone. Tom poured 2 whiskeys that night. I sat on the porch and looked at the fields. The irrigation line finally held. The wind was calm. "You could leave," he said. "I won't." He nodded. "My daughter," he said after a while, "she's not tough. Not like her mother. But she sees things clear. When she said your name still matters." I believed her. Orion doesn't. "No," he agreed. "But we do." Next morning, the phone rang just after sunrise. It was Carter. "You might want to come down to the county office," he said. "Someone you'll want to meet." I arrived to find a man in a uniform I hadn't seen in years. Crisp. Trim. His presence too clean for a county office. Colonel Marcus Hill. He didn't stand when I walked in. Just looked at me, jaw set, as if trying to swallow something bitter. I wrote the report, he said quietly. I know. I believed the men who brought me the evidence. I didn't check it. That's on me. I stood still. I lost 2 men to Orion Global's cover-up last year, he continued. They tried to disappear them. But this time, it didn't work. I've got names. Transfers. Bank files. Everything. He slid a folder across the desk. This clears you, he said. And buries them. Tom's voice came back to me, from that first night on the porch. You just try to keep something alive. Why now? I asked. Hill didn't blink. Because someone gave you a chance. And I see now, I never did. The sheriff stepped forward. They're going to hit the farm tonight. We can stop them, but it's your call. I looked at the folder, then out the window at the quiet main street. Let's end it, I said. And this time, I wouldn't be the only one standing. They came after sundown. No headlights. No noise. Just the crackle of gravel under tires and the soft thud of boots against soil. 13 men. Maybe more. All dressed like shadows. Night vision mounted. Suppressors fitted. No insignias. I watched them from the barn's upper window. My breath didn't fog the glass. The air had gone cold and dry, the kind of stillness that made a man feel like he was back in a country that wasn't his. Tom stood in the hallway below, loading a pump shotgun that hadn't seen light in years. Lucy was in the crawl space, safe, hidden, just like we planned. Carter and his 2 deputies were in the tree line. Radios off. Waiting. We didn't plan to win. Only to hold. Until they arrived. I stepped into the yard, my palms open, the dirt cold beneath my boots. Jack Carson, the lead man called. His voice came from a mask, mechanical and empty. Step forward. I'm already here. You're under federal review for dissemination of classified. That lie's dead, I said, my voice low. Hill brought the documents. He paused. You don't have the authority anymore. One of the others flinched. Not visible, but I knew the body language. Orders without foundation start to rot. Men begin to question. Hands begin to shake. You're not walking away, he said. I didn't answer. That's when I heard it. The crunch of fresh tires on gravel. Not stealthy. Not hidden. A white sheriff's cruiser rolled in from the north road, lights flashing, but only once. Behind it came 2 trucks. Then 3. Then more. Civilian pickups. County rigs. Dusty old Fords and Chevys. Each one carrying a man or woman I'd seen before. In town. On the road. On the farm. Veterans. Locals. Farmers. People. And at the front of the second truck, Colonel Marcus Hill, full dress, the kind of uniform they only wear when the cameras are watching. But there were no cameras here. Only truth. He stepped down. Walked forward. No vest. No weapon. The Orion men stiffened. You don't belong here, Hill said. His voice was calm. But it cut through the night like a blade. This isn't a sanctioned operation. Your protection is gone. Your charter is revoked. Any further action here will be prosecuted under federal and civilian law. The leader turned, scanned the crowd. Then looked back at me. You're still a traitor, he said. No, I replied. I'm still standing. Then I stepped forward. Hand still open. He didn't move. For a long second, I thought he might raise his rifle. Might force this into violence. Then he turned his back. And the rest followed. When it ended, there were no cheers. No victory signs. No shouts. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows something sacred. Not triumph. Not vengeance. Just survival. Hill handed Carter the flash drive. "This has everything," he said. "They won't be back. They can't." I stood there, breathing hard. The cold finally catching my lungs. Tom stepped beside me. "You did it." "No," I said. "We did." He nodded. Then Lucy emerged from the crawl space. Her eyes wide. Not afraid. She ran into the yard. Not to her father. To me. She wrapped her arms around my waist and held on. Not tightly. Just firmly enough to say, "You're here. You're safe. You're seen." For the first time in years, I believed it. By midnight, they were gone. The SUVs. The shadows. The threat. Only the field remained. Damaged. But still alive. Like all of us. Hill stayed behind. Watched the wind roll across the rows of corn. "You should know something," he said to me quietly. "They had authorization to eliminate. Not detain." I figured. "You stood anyway. Didn't come to run." He looked at me. "I'll testify. If this ever goes to court. If the country ever finds its soul again." "You already did," I said. He nodded. Then drove away. In the dark, I walked back to the barn. The tractor still leaned in the corner. Rusted. Steady. I sat beneath it. Not hiding. Just resting. Above me, the Nebraska sky was wide and clean. And I was still breathing. The weeks that followed moved slow, like fog through a cornfield. There were no headlines. No arrests. Just a shifting silence in Boone County. One by one, the locals began to speak of what they'd seen. A farmer and a drifter standing their ground. A sheriff who didn't look the other way. A man who came back to the place where he once saved a life, only to save something bigger. The Ridley farm became a kind of beacon. Not overnight. But little by little. First came the irrigation crew, 4 veterans from the next county who heard what happened. They didn't charge. Just showed up with a trenching machine and a blueprint. Then came the electricians. One of them had a sister in Kandahar, still carried a bullet scar. He rewired the barn for free. Next was the co-op. They forgave Tom's debt. Called it a community reset. Nobody used the word charity. They just said, "It's time we remember who we are." Lucy returned to school. Not a university, not yet. But she started running classes out of the barn: agriculture, sustainability, basic mechanics. Veterans and local kids sat side by side, learning how to grow something again. She called it the ground school. Said it wasn't just about soil. It was about roots. I stayed on. No title. No pay. But every morning, I walked the rows. Checked the fence line. Tightened the bolts on the new irrigation reels. I didn't speak much. Didn't need to. The work was enough. One day, Tom came to me with an envelope. "It's not much," he said. "But it's yours. Share of the harvest." And I fixed the VA papers. Hill signed them. "You're cleared." I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter and a reinstatement certificate. The kind I thought I'd never see again. The kind that said, "We see you." I didn't thank him with words. I just shook his hand. Firm. Steady. In October, Lucy organized the county's Harvest Day celebration. They'd never held one before. Said it was too much work, too few people left. But this year was different. They hung bunting across the fence posts. Laid long tables in the field. Brought crock-pots and cider, corn husks and lanterns. Children ran between the rows with clean hands and loud laughter. And at the edge of the crowd stood a flagpole. Tom raised the flag himself, an old American flag they'd found in the attic. Faded. Frayed at the ends. It had once been carried by a combat medic during the last evacuation from Kabul. Tom had stitched it clean. Before raising it, he turned to the crowd. "This flag isn't made of fabric," he said, his voice clear over the wind. "It's made of what we were, and what we must be again." Nobody clapped. They just stood in silence. Not out of obedience, but out of respect. Real respect. I sat at the edge of the field, on an old wooden bench Lucy had dragged from the schoolhouse. A boy came by with a plate of cornbread. Handed it to me like he knew who I was. Like it mattered. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then ran off. I watched him go. Watched the way the sunlight caught the dust in the air. Watched the way the wind moved across the flag. And I felt something shift. Not closure. Not absolution. But something closer to peace. The next morning, I returned to the attic. Found the box Lucy had opened weeks ago. Inside it, beneath the patches and the photographs, was a notebook I hadn't seen in years. My handwriting. My report. The one that ruined me. I took it outside. Lit a small fire by the edge of the field. Then fed it page by page into the flame. Not out of regret. But because I didn't need it anymore. The truth had already done its work. Now it was time to let it rest. Winter came slow that year. First frost curled the edges of the soybean leaves. The ground hardened just enough to make the morning chores quieter. And the porch steps, once brittle from rot, now held firm beneath boots. Every morning, I rose before light. Walked the fence line with a thermos in one hand, the cold air biting into the joints of my fingers. And every evening, I sat in the same wooden chair facing west. The place where the sun dropped behind the ridge. The place where once, months ago, I'd stood behind a rusted tractor, waiting for Orion to take me. They never came back. The justice system moved slow, but it moved. Colonel Hill's files circulated quietly through congressional offices. A subcommittee was opened without headlines. A Federal Review Board took statements, off the record, out of sight. 3 executives disappeared from Orion's board. 6 lower officers resigned. No convictions. Not yet. But silence had been broken. Sometimes, that was enough to start something. Tom watched the hearings from his laptop. Said little. But I could see what it meant to him, to have the story spoken aloud. To have the debt settled in public, not just in blood. Lucy asked if I'd testify. I told her the truth. I already did. When I stayed. She didn't argue. Just nodded. As if she understood. The local paper ran a story in December. Front page. 1 photo. No names. Just the Ridley farm in early dawn, steam rising from a herd of cattle, one man walking alone between the frost-laced rows. The caption read, "Sometimes, the ones who disappear are the ones holding everything together." I didn't keep the clipping. But Lucy did. She taped it above the chalkboard in the barn, next to a faded map of Nebraska and a list titled, "Ground School, Winter Term." Enrollment had doubled. One morning, while repairing a hitch on the seed drill, Tom came up behind me. You ever think about staying? I stood. Looked at the land. The fields, the barns, the shape of the wind moving across a place that didn't ask questions. I already have, I said. That night, Lucy gave me a set of keys. Your name's on the lease now, she said. You're part of this. You always were. I didn't answer. Just pocketed the keys. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like a void. It felt like a road. Rough. Unpaved. But real. One evening, just after sunset, Carter came by with a man I didn't know. Said his name was Whitaker. VA oversight. Former infantry. I read your report, he said quietly, the original one. Before it was buried. I also read Hill's file. And the testimonies. I waited. He extended his hand. We owe you more than a certificate. You know that. I shook his hand. Don't want medals, I said. Good, he replied. We don't have any. But then he reached into his coat and pulled out a plaque. Simple wood. One brass plate. To Jack Carson, whose silence never meant surrender. I held it. Didn't know what to say. He stepped off the porch. Got in his car. As he pulled away, I read the inscription again. Then placed it on the bench beside me. And let the silence stay. A month later, the farm held a second gathering. This one smaller. No celebration. Just remembrance. Tom's wife's birthday had passed quietly in January. So he built a small cedar box and placed it beneath the oak at the hill's edge. Lucy said a few words. Then others followed. About people who were gone. About wars that never left. And things that were never supposed to be forgotten. No one cried. But the silence afterward held every word we didn't say. After the others left, I stayed behind. The sun was setting again, long and orange through the branches. I knelt by the tree. Pressed my hand to the cedar. And whispered something I hadn't said since the day I left the uniform behind. I'm still here. Not much else. Just enough. Spring came with thawed soil and long rains. Lucy painted the barn red. Tom bought a new seed tender. The co-op installed a grain dryer the county hadn't seen in 10 years. People began to visit. Some for classes. Some just to see it. The place that hadn't died. A woman came from the VA clinic in Lincoln. Said she wanted to start a story archive, oral history. Veterans could talk, if they wanted. I asked who would listen. She said, people like me. That was enough. Tom offered the schoolhouse for recordings. Lucy built shelves for books that hadn't been touched in decades. And I told one story. Just one. About a convoy in 2007. About a Humvee. About pulling a man out of fire. About forgetting my own name so his could be remembered. They recorded it. Then left me be. That summer, we harvested clean. No shortages. No sabotage. No fear. Just work. The kind that kept a man whole. I watched the younger veterans come and go, some with shadows in their eyes, some with nothing but hunger. We gave them something solid. Fences to mend. Rows to walk. A bed to sleep in. It wasn't therapy. But it was real. And for some of us, that was the only medicine that ever worked. One evening, Lucy brought out a box she hadn't opened before. Inside, letters. All addressed to someone named Jack. Some were from units I didn't recognize. Some from families I couldn't place. All of them said the same thing. You saved us. You mattered. We remember. She placed them in a drawer beneath the bench. Quiet. private. Then sat beside me. "You'll never be forgotten," she said. I didn't reply. Just looked at the stars rising over the trees. And knew she was right. I live in the north bedroom now. The one that looks out over the fields. Mornings come soft, light edging over the furrows, the barn door creaking open in the wind. Sometimes I sit on the porch with coffee and watch the tractors move, slow and steady, like memory. Tom says we'll make it another season. I believe him. Lucy keeps growing the school. She started a journal. Prints one copy a month and gives it to the feed store, the library, the post office. Each issue holds a name, a veteran, a story, a place. She says we don't write history to remember war. We write it to remember people. I believe her too. No one talks about Orion anymore. Their silence is louder than their presence ever was. The federal reports remain sealed. But in places like this, in Boone County, in the corners of fields and the hands of working people, the truth is no longer hidden. It's lived. In every bolt tightened. In every fence mended. In every voice that says, "You matter." I sit on the porch most nights. No medals. No ceremony. Just peace. Sometimes, that's more than a man ever expects. I saved a foreign country once. But my real battle? It was here. At home. It took me years to learn that doing the right thing doesn't always bring reward. Sometimes it leaves you with nothing but yourself. But if you're lucky, if someone sees you, really sees you, it gives you something else. A place. A purpose. A name that doesn't disappear. All it takes is one person willing to give someone a chance. Sometimes, that chance can change everything. And sometimes, it can bring a man home.